The famine of 1847 was a difficult time for many Irish families. Between 1845 and 1870, at least 3 million people left Ireland. There had been death from starvation, along with children dying from illnesses during the cold winter months. The only choice families had was to save up their money and send off their oldest child to America in hopes of a better life. The immigrants chosen had to accept the responsibility and live up to the role of providing for his or her family back home.
There are three parts of the American wake. The first is death. People saw little difference between going to America and going to the grave, so they were unlikely to return. The night before the son or daughter immigrated to the United States, a merry wake would be thrown to signify that the son or daughter would not return home. During the famine, the wake was seen as very sad and a somber occasion because many could not afford to provide food, tobacco, and liquor for the family and friends. As things got better, more families could afford to pay for such things or would pay for them on credit, most of which would be paid after the first paycheck was sent home from the son or daughter that immigrated. The evening started with stories, which eventually led to the main topic of conversation, the United States and wealth. Many guests came with gifts for the immigrant that consisted mainly of food. If the guests could not afford to provide gifts, they would provide words of affection or recite prayers in the immigrant's name. Throughout the evening, with liquor and tobacco being heavily consumed, the wake would escalate into a night full of emotions. As the night continued on, in the very early hours of the morning, the father would initiate singing and dancing since it would be the last time the family would be together. Once the dancing was over, the older women started the keening, and soon after, everyone joined in. As soon as the keening stopped, the final goodbye between the child and parents would take place. This final farewell signaled the end of the wake and the beginning of the child's journey to America.
The second part of the American wake is known as the burial, where the immigrants would board the ship for the departure to North America. Many of the priests would stand out on the road to see their parishioners safely out of Ireland. The immigrants would gather around while the priests gave words of advice as well as a final blessing, asking God to protect them on their long journey. The group of close friends that were present during the boat's departure never took a shortcut to the departing spot, in fear that if you hasten the immigrant's departure, you will jinx his arrival. Eventually, the friends and family that accompanied him on his walk to the boat would hand over his bags and belongings and say their final goodbyes. This would include handshakes, promises, hopes, tears, and blessings. The immigrant would continue the journey for many miles until he reached the major port called Queenstown, which was located in the city of Cork. The journey could last months, and the boats were normally crowded with little food and room for everyone. The immigrants endured a lot on the journey and were honored for their bravery and strength when they arrived to America.
Arriving into America, considered to be their new birth, the Irishmen knew that their journey would not be easy. The fight for survival was endured with horrific poverty and discrimination, which led to unhealthy housing conditions. Approximately 80% of infants born from Irish immigrants in the city of New York in the 19th century died because of their inadequate living circumstances. During the 19th century, Irish men were looked at as the lowest on the hierarchy scale. Employment ads were even broadcasting that they did not want any Irish to apply. Also, the Chicago Post wrote an article stating, "The Irish fill our prisons and our poorhouses. Putting them on a boat and sending them home would end crime in this country." These were clear notions that they were not wanted there in the U.S., but the Irish did not surrender. They kept trying to thrive and achieve the life they dreamt of when traveling to America. Ironically, during the time the Irishmen arrived, the U.S. was in desperate need of men for heavy work to be done, such as constructing railroads, canals, and bridges. The women also were needed to take care of children and clean. Throughout their work, it was noticed that they were hard workers with honest and cheerful attitudes. Once the Civil War had come around, thousands of Irishmen dedicated their time and lives to fight for the American people. This was a huge turning point for the Irish, resulting in respect and acceptance. As years passed, the Irish people were moving up the hierarchy scale and working in good professions with adequate living conditions.